The genealogy of morality opens with a section about master and slave moralities, and we've seen this before in Beyond Good and Evil. And Nietzsche repeats some of the points that we've had already about how the master morality is the original morality. It's very simple. It's about the masters looking at each other and judging, who is a good fellow, who is a good bloke. Whereas the slave morality is reactive. So the principal concept for them is evil, right? And, well, good for them isn't a concept in its own right. It's simply the absence of evil. That actually is an echo of something Schopenhauer says. The difference, something we haven't seen before, as he develops this idea in the genealogy, is the presence of the priests and the role of the priests. So I want to say a little bit about priests and asceticism. And the bit I'm talking about is paragraphs 6 and 7 of the first essay in the genealogy. So this is where he introduces the priestly aristocracy, right? What distinguishes the priestly aristocracy? What is the source of their power? And this is a deep and important question, because you might wonder, how is it that the happy warriors, the warrior aristocracy, allowed anybody else to have any power? There they are, they're in charge of everything, they have all the wealth, and yet they allow that situation to change. And you can see this all the way through the history of the ancient world and the history of medieval Europe, where kings and popes are in conflict. And, Stalin famously asked, how many divisions does the Pope have? People remembering that now will point out that the Soviet Union is no more. It only lasted for 70 years, but the Catholic Church is still there. There is no longer a General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, but there is still a Pope. So, how did the priests get to be that powerful? And part of the answer is asceticism. And asceticism is a theme that we'll meet all the way through the book. And again, like we said about everything else, it's something that's useful for different people in different times, in different ways. First of all, what is asceticism? It's the idea that we should live as simply as possible, that you need to gain control over your passions. This is an idea you find in Buddhism, for example, that all life is suffering. Suffering is caused by passion. And what do you do about it? Well, you discipline yourself. You find ways to tamp down, to damp down your passions, so that instead of being swept away by torrents of emotion, you will be serene, right? You won't be tortured by jealousy or covetousness or anger or thirst for revenge or any of the things that drive tragic drama, or comedy for that matter. You will just sit there being serene. How do you achieve this? Well, by living very simply, by having a very simple diet, by practicing bodily austerities. So you live like a monk. You live on bread and water, or a vegetarian diet and water. You get up early. You have cold showers. Maybe you do some kind of strenuous exercise or something. A kind of monkish life of prayer, and of course you abstain from strong drink and drugs and sex. Always, this kind of stuff involves abstinence from sex. Now, it arises in a religious context, but I think it's important to notice that it's an idea that has broken out of its religious beginnings, and you find everywhere. And there was a chap who used to sell pamphlets on Oxford Street in London about how if you reduce your passions, and you eat less protein, you will be healthier and happier. And he used to sell pamphlets explaining this. And he wasn't strictly speaking selling a religion. So there you have asceticism as just a kind of straightforward piece of lifestyle advice. So the priests start out as people who are kind of impressive. Why? Because they abstain from sex. They're very fastidious about what they eat. They're very fastidious about their personal hygiene. And this already makes them somehow culturally impressive. And that once that becomes a source of power, that then accelerates and becomes an established religious practice. And that allows the priest to explain people's misfortunes to them, right? So there's a part of the story later on where the priest explains people's suffering to them. Says, no, you are responsible for your suffering. So the priest introduces the concept of sin. And this is quite important because Nietzsche has a story about how we get the concept of guilt, and we'll see that eventually that's to do with cruelty against the self. But sin is a whole other thing. Sin, because you feel guilty for particular transgressions, but sin is like having a cold. It's a kind of pervasive sense of unworthiness, and you need a priest to give you that. So the priests are the innovation in genealogy over the two moralities story that you get in Beyond Good and Evil, and we see the priests all the way through to the end. But the priests are also the pattern for other cultural operators. They are the pattern for artists. They are the pattern for philosophers. Why? Because the priests develop asceticism as a source of personal and professional power. If you refrain from living a wild lifestyle, if you live simply, eat simply, live alone, solitude, life in the desert, so on, well, that gives you power as a philosopher and as an artist, right? And, possibly, as a scientist, right? Or if there's anything that you need to focus on, the priest shows you how to do it, because the priest shows you how to clean up your lifestyle, how to focus your energies. The priest introduces discipline. The priest is far more disciplined than the happy warrior. The happy warrior is brave. The happy warrior obeys orders on the battlefield. But once the battle's won, they then feast, and there's not much discipline there at all. Whereas the priest internalizes discipline. The priest doesn't just worry about being brave on the battlefield. The priest gives himself a discipline which he maintains all the time. And that's the source of his power. The other thing about the priest is that he's clever. So if you value scholarship, if you value philosophy, if the life of the disciplined scholar who pursues the truth, even at the expense of his own relative prosperity, and is willing to put aside his favourite ideas because the evidence is against them, if all that seems deep and valuable and important to you, it starts with the priests. And it starts with the priests finding a way to wrest power away from the aristocrat warriors. It's that basic.